إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم أنطقني بالهدى وألهمني التقوى ووفقني للتي هي أزكى. اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بنور الفهم وافتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. قال الله الحكيم في كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. من جاء بالحسنة فله خير منها وهم من فزع يومئذ آمنون. Whoever comes with a good deed shall receive better than it, and they are safe on the day of horror. One of the names of Qiyamah, Yawm al-Qiyamah, the day of judgment, the day of resurrection, has many names in the Holy Quran. Al-Qari'ah, Al-Waqi'ah, Al-Qiyamah, and many other names. One of them is Yawm al-Faza' al-Akbar, the day of great horror. Faza', a very, very high level of fear. And the reason for this name is that most people on the grounds of Qiyamah will experience these dreadful scenes and will be in a very, very high state of fear, with exception to certain groups. Certain groups will experience the opposite effect. They'll experience joy, pleasure, and safety. The Anbiya, the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the messengers, the successors, the imams, the martyrs, those who have reached a very, very high status of righteousness, like Salman al-Muhammadi al-Farisi, like Habib al-Najjar, the Shaheed in Surah Yasin, and many others. But also there is a group of mu'mineen and mu'minat who possess certain qualities that have shielded and protected them from the horrors of the day of judgment. The verse says, "Man ja'a bil hasana," one who comes with a hasana. There are hasanat, as we mentioned last night, that we do in this life but lose. We don't maintain, we don't preserve. But then there are hasanat that we maintain and preserve and keep with us until we reach the day of Qiyamah. What are some of these hasanat? In this lecture, I want us to reflect on this. What are some of these unique hasanat and good deeds that act and serve as shields for us on the day of Qiyamah that allow us to be safe? وَهُمْ مِنْ فَزَعٍ يَوْمَئِذٍ آمِنُونَ. I selected 5 ahadith from the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam that highlight these qualities. I'll begin inshallah the first hadith after a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This hadith is in Kitab al-Faqih. Faqih man la yahduruhu al-faqih. The faqih of the one who does not have a faqih to resort to. I probably mentioned this story in the past, but the Shaykh al-Saduq, the son, Shaykh al-Saduq, the father, was married for a long time, could not have children. So he sent a request through the third deputy, Al-Husayn ibn Rawh al-Nubakhti. He says, ask the Imam of our time to make dua for me. I want children. He says Allah will give him 2 children, 2 boys, who will have ilm or faqaha, but not from his current wife, from a different wife. He left it there. And yes, with time, this person had another wife, had two boys, a Shaykh al-Saduq, whose name is Muhammad, and his brother Ali. And both were ulama al-muhaddithin. A Shaykh al-Saduq, he says, once I was on a trip to Samarkand, modern day Uzbekistan. Samarkand had a friend of his, perhaps also one of the ulama. So he says, I have a suggestion for you. Sometimes these suggestions, they don't take much from us, but they have so much great reward due to the effect, the profound effect of these suggestions. So don't underestimate a suggestion when you have it. Whether it's going to be taken or not, there's no harm in giving it. This person says, I have a suggestion. He says, I have a book that I have come across by Al-Razi. Al-Razi means the person from Ray, modern day Tehran. And there's different Razis, so not necessarily the Razi that is known for mathematics. There's different Razis. He says he has a book called Tabib Man La Yahduruhu Tabib. The physician for one who does not have access to physician. He wrote prescriptions. If you have this pain, you do this. If you have this pain, you do that. So he says, I have a request for you. Based on this, why don't you write a book that has the ahkam from the Ahlul Bayt for those who don't have access to a faqih? Because the Shia during that time, not all of them had ulama around them. You're in Samarkand during that time, you may not have access to ulama. And we didn't have means of communication that were easy at that time. So Shaykh al-Saduq was inspired by this suggestion. So he compiled this book and he called it فَقِيهُ مَنْ لَا يَحْضُرُهُ الْفَقِيهُ. And it is one of our 4 most important books of hadith that no jurist today deduces Allah without resorting to Kitab al-Faqih. You see that suggestion, how much it bared the fruits. And until today we mention a hadith from Kitab al-Faqih. Now, in this kitab, he reports a hadith. He attributes it to the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. The Holy Prophet here is reported to have said, whoever is tempted to commit an indecent act or unlawful desire, but refrains from it out of fear of Allah, Allah will prevent the fire of hell from consuming him, and Allah will save him on the day of the grand horror, Yawmul Faza'ul Akbar, and fulfill his promise to him, his promise of sending him to paradise. Temptations surround us. Whether we like it or not, temptations are all over the place. At the tip of our fingers, there's temptations. The world of internet is filled with temptations. Today, one of the features of this age, in this modern era that we're in, is the era of lustful desires. It's all about desires, meaning desires, specifically lustful desires. People do all kinds of things just to attain that. It has become a very, very high priority. Of course, in a lawful way, there's no problem. But the problem is, it has been promoted in an unlawful way. How people dress, how people act, how people engage in relationships. So temptations are at their peak. You go to school, you go to college, you go to work, you go to the gym. Wherever you go, there's temptations. All over the place, all over the world. And this is not just here. It's a universal problem. And again, at the tip of your fingers, if you choose to stay home, temptations will still come to you. You try to go on YouTube to find a video, a good video, some type of advertisement will come unless you pay the fee. Unless you pay the monthly fee to avoid these things. And I think it's worth it. It's worth paying the fee. I'm not trying to advertise for YouTube, but it's honestly worth it due to the scenes that you preserve yourself from. You may think, well, it's okay, it's just an ad, it's seen. But that could have a profound negative effect on your subconscious when you allow it to be, because it becomes a normal, it breaks that barrier. It's okay, today I see a half-naked woman, tomorrow it becomes easy, and I see this, music is playing that is haram, this is happening, it's okay, I'm not paying attention to it, but it will find its way to the subconscious. So therefore, it's definitely worth preserving our minds from such negative and filthy content. So the temptations all over. These temptations for us are a great opportunity to excel and be among those who will be saved on the Day of Judgment, if we look at it in a positive mindset. How? Whenever the temptation occurs and we, with our strong willpower, are able to overcome it and not act according to the temptation, not respond to that unlawful desire or that whisper of Iblis, that in and of itself is regarded as one of the deeds dear and near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is a deed that will shield us on the day of Qiyamah. This is one hadith. Another hadith is in Al-Kafi. Al-Kafi is one of the 4 books as well. We just talked about Al-Faqih. Al-Kafi was compiled by a Shaykh al-Kulayni, Muhammad ibn Yaqub al-Kulayni. All of our books of hadith were compiled by fuqaha, ulama, by the names of Muhammad. And let's recite a salawat in honor of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Muhammad al-Kulayni compiled Al-Kafi. Muhammad al-Saduq compiled Man La Yahduruhu al-Faqih. Muhammad al-Tusi compiled the 2 other books, Al-Istibsar and Al-Tahdhib. And Muhammad al-Tusi is the founder of the seminary of Najaf. So here Al-Kafi, Al-Kulayni in his book Al-Kafi reports a hadith, and he attributes this hadith to the 7th Imam, Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim alayhi salam. He says, indeed, Allah has servants on earth who strive to meet the needs of people. They are the ones who will be safe on the Day of Judgment. Meeting the needs of people doesn't necessarily, or does not limit, or is not limited and exclusive to just providing food for them. There are many needs that we have. Word of advice meets the need of the person seeking that advice. Sometimes a smile, another person is down and they're depressed, and that smile could meet their need at that moment. That is also fulfilling their need. A need could be giving them information, guiding them to a specific path. All these are examples of fulfilling of needs. Qada'ul Hawa'ij has been stressed so much in the ahadith that it's really hard sometimes to comprehend the abundant reward that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to those who are ready to meet the needs of others and serve them when they can. Of course, everyone has a capability, and everyone has limits. We're not saying that whatever needs come your way, you must fulfill it. But when someone is in need of anything and you are able to meet that need, whether directly yourself or refer them to someone who can, then know that this is an act of righteousness that will guarantee you salvation on the Day of Qiyamah. The 3rd hadith is in Thawabul A'mal by a Shaykh al-Saduq. Who knows, maybe in the near future there might be a question that might come, and the prize might be something very, very expensive, and that would say, in this lecture, name these qualities. So I don't know if you're paying attention. Anyhow, Thawabul A'mal by a Shaykh al-Saduq. A Shaykh al-Saduq is very talented and has this pen that is Mubarak. Some ulama have a Mubarak pen, and this is symbolic. Their pen is Mubarak. In a short span, they're able to produce so much. He has so much beneficial books. All his books are beneficial. One of them is called Thawabul A'mal. Thawab, you know what thawab means. I don't have to translate, right? It's the most important thing for you guys, right? Thawab, we all want thawab. Thawab means good reward, good deeds, or good hasanat. This thawab, this good reward, he has compiled a book that mentions the thawab of every deed. Of course, he couldn't encompass everything, but whatever hadith that says there's a thawab for this deed, he put it together. And then he also has a book called Iqabul A'mal, or perhaps they're compiled in one. Thawabul A'mal wa Iqabul A'mal. The A'mal, the acts that are worthy of reward, and the acts that are worthy of punishment. In this kitab, he says that the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he says, whoever acknowledges the worth of an elderly person and respects them for their old age will be granted safety by Allah from the fright of the day of judgment. Honoring our elderly is a very, very righteous deed. In fact, the hadith says honoring the elderly in general, let alone our mu'mineen and mu'minat, muslimeen and muslimat, let alone our own parents and grandparents. Honoring the elderly and giving them the priority and giving them the respect they deserve is an act of righteousness that safeguards the mu'min on the day of Qiyamah. And this is important, especially for our children and grandchildren, to teach them, because with the change of generations, we don't see the same. And this is a very general observation. I'm not saying here, it's a very general observation. We began to witness those who lived during the previous generation. We see and sense that there is a difference, there's a variance in the level of respect. In the previous generation, the respect and awe that we have for our elderly was very high. And unfortunately, as the generations shift and change, we see a decline in that respect, where somebody could talk to their grandfather like they're talking to their friend. And I remember at a time where I didn't witness any of my grandparents, they all left to the barzakh, but the elders that we had in the family, we were too afraid to even approach them. Not because they were going to hurt us, but there is that level of respect. Whereas today you find that an elderly could be walking and their grandson or child can just come right in front of them, respond to them when they say something. It's like one-on-one kind of thing. And that is a problem. That's a huge decline. Hadith says that this act of honoring an elderly is an act that is highly, highly important. I'm not talking about whether it's obligatory or not, that's a fiqhi discussion, but at least in terms of the great reward that awaits the person who observes these akhlaq and these qualities, is that they will be safeguarded on the day of Qiyamah. And another hadith, and this is by our beloved sixth Imam, Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And this is an Al-Kafi by Shaykh al-Kulayni. He says, whoever restrains his anger while having the ability to act upon it, Allah will fill his heart with safety and faith on the day of judgment. People who become angry and are provoked are of two types. In fact, three types. The first type are those who want to retaliate, but they don't have the power to do so. The person they're angry with is their boss. The person they're angry with is someone who they can't retaliate against. So they keep it in. They don't keep it in because they want to keep it in. They keep it in because they can't do anything about it. That suppressing of anger in this situation is not of value, is not of merit. The second person is the person that would automatically retaliate and make use of the power they have. And that is, of course, highly, highly dispraised. The third category are those who, despite being able to retaliate and execute a command because they are in authority and power to do so, they choose to suppress their anger. And that is the one that is referred to here in this hadith by our Imam alayhi salam. Is when we are angry, whether it is at our children, spouses, people who are that work for us, people who we deal with, and we have authority over them and power to retaliate. If we suppress that anger, that will translate on the day of Qiyamah as a form of joy, and it turns into a safety and a protector from the faza'ul akbar, from the fear and the dreadfulness of the day of Qiyamah. And another hadith, and this is in Amali al-Shaykh al-Mufid. This is another alim who is highly, highly respected in our Shia scholarship. Al-Shaykh al-Mufid was after Al-Shaykh al-Saduq in one generation. Al-Shaykh al-Mufid is buried in Baghdad. Those who have visited our 7th Imam and 9th Imam, he is there. And Al-Shaykh al-Mufid was called Al-Mufid for different reasons I'm not going to discuss right now, but Mufid means beneficial. Mufid comes from fa'ida, benefit, beneficial. Some state or some assert that this title was given to him by our 12th Imam, because during his time there are letters that have been attributed to the Imam of our time that Al-Shaykh al-Mufid received. One of these letters address him by saying, Afid ya Mufid. Benefit others, O beneficent, Mufid, one who benefits others. Irrespective of the reason why he's called a Shaykh al-Mufid, he was a grand scholar, a great leader in the history of Shia scholarship. He has multiple books as well. One of his books is Al-Amali, and he attributes his hadith to our sixth Imam, Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And I want you to pay attention to this hadith. Just try to focus on it, because we will take it to the Holy Quran right after this hadith to see how the Quran supports this notion that will be mentioned in that hadith. He says that, our Imam alayhi salam, when Allah resurrects the believer from their grave, a figure will emerge alongside them. As soon as they are resurrected, a figure that looks like a nurani figure, not an angel, something else, something that can speak, something that can console, something that can make you feel good. He says that figure will come right in front of them as soon as they come out of their grave. And whenever the believer sees any of the horrors of the Day of Judgment, this figure will say to him, do not fear or grieve. Rejoice in the joy and honor from Allah the Exalted. The figure will continue to bring good tidings of joy and honor from Allah until the believer stands before Allah, the Most Gracious, for an easy hisab reckoning, and is commanded to enter paradise. Throughout this whole journey, this figure is keeping this person company and giving them glad tidings. But then you are curious, as this person on the Day of Judgment will be curious as well, to know who that figure is. So he says, may Allah have mercy on you. You were the one who came out with me from the grave. You have continuously brought me good news of joy and honor from Allah until I witnessed it. Who are you? The figure says to him, I am the joy you brought to your fellow believer in dunya. Allah created me from that joy to give you glad tidings. This hadith speaks to the importance of a very, very, very recommended practice known as idkhal al-surur ala al-mu'min, bringing joy to a mu'min. In other words, making a mu'min happy. It may be just a smile, as we mentioned earlier. It may be a nice word that is said. And that mu'min could be your own child, could be your own spouse, could be your own family member, your friend, your community member, and so on and so forth. Bringing joy to them, taking them out of their state of grief, out of their state of depression, is a very, very desired act in Islam. Idkhal al-surur ala al-mu'min. Some ulama have concluded from this hadith and other ahadith that there is a concept, and the concept that they refer to is called the tajassum of a'mal. They said that this hadith and the verses of the Quran that we'll recite indicate that our a'mal have an embodiment. They are not rewarded something other than their own embodiment. Let me explain that even with more clarity. Our ulama are three categories or three groups with respect to reward and punishment. How do we receive our reward and punishment in the hereafter? Do you think that ulama are unanimous on how? No, there are three opinions, three groups. The first group says that reward and punishment is set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you do this, this will be the reward. So the reward is separate from the amal. It's like saying, if you paint my house, I will give you $100. The $100 does not come as an effect of the paint. It's something that is part of the contract, a contractual or a transactional style deal or promise. If you do this, you'll get this. So ulama, this first group of ulama, say that the reward and punishment are set by Allah. If you do this, you will get that. If you do this, you will spend this time in hellfire, and so on and so forth. The second group says no. The human soul creates its own reward and punishment. How does it do that? These people, these ulama, say that our souls, our nufus, have different sifat and attributes. That's why it's important to cleanse the soul and to embellish the soul with the best of qualities. The soul, the more you increase its qualities of perfection, the more it will generate that joy and reward for you that is everlasting. And that is how these people, that second group, explain eternity in hellfire. They say Allah does not keep these people in hellfire for eternity. Because some might say, why? Why keep them there eternal, even if they're the worst person? He says, Allah is not the one who keeps them in hellfire for eternity. It's their souls that have produced this everlasting punishment. That's the second group. Third group say, no, we don't agree with the first, we don't agree with the second, and we believe that we have verses to support us. The third group says, no, every action that we do has a tangible, worldly aspect and an unseen, esoteric essence. Every action. You heard the verse that says, أَيُحِبُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَن يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتًا فَكَرِهْتُمُوهُ. The verse that talks about ghiba. That when you commit ghiba, it's like you're eating the flesh. These people say this is not a symbolic or metaphoric or simile. No, no, no. They say this is real. That the action of ghiba in its outer appearance is words that you're saying, that I'm saying. But the esoteric essence of ghiba and manifestation of ghiba, which will not be viewed here in this dunya, it will be viewed in the akhirah, is eating the flesh of a believer. الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ أَمْوَالَ الْيَتَامَى يَأْكُلُونَ فِي بُطُونِهِمْ نَارًا. Those who consume the wealth of orphans consume fire in their stomachs. They say, yeah, that is true. Fire will manifest on the day of judgment and it will enter into their stomach. They say the Quran supports our understanding of this concept. Let's look at the Holy Quran to see whether the verses do support that notion. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Verse 30 of Surah Al-Imran. يوم تجد كل نفس ما عملت من خير محضرا وما عملت من سوء تود لو أن بينها وبينه أمدا بعيدا ويحذركم الله نفسه والله رؤوف بالعباد. The verse says, on the day that every soul shall find present what it has done of good. Everything that you have done of good, you will find it present in front of you. Now someone might say, yeah, but this could be symbolic. Number one, as a rule of thumb, when you deal with the Quran, the default is that nothing is symbolic and metaphoric unless you have to. What do you mean unless you have to? Unless the literal meaning contradicts an established principle, logical or Islamic. For example, Yadullah fawqa aydihim. There we have to run and say this is not literal because Allah does not have a hand. But when you say that you will find your action in front of you, there is no logical issue in accepting that your amal could come to manifestation. So there's no point in you running to and resorting to what we call ta'wil and say that this is actually a metaphor you need to prove. It's not about saying it's a metaphor. I can say to anything, oh, this is a metaphor. I have to prove my stance. The default, when in doubt, it's not a metaphor. It's literally meant. Now, how do we prove that this is even literally meant? The rest of the ayah. Because the rest of the ayah says what? It says that وَمَا عَمِلَتْ مِنْ سُوءٍ. In whatever evil it has done, تَوَدُّ لَوْ أَنَّ بَيْنَهَا وَبَيْنَهُ أَمَدًا بَعِيدًا. It wishes on that day that it can be moved away from that act of evil that manifested. Had it been symbolic, there's no point of moving away and running away from it. But because it's real, it's causing them pain and discomfort, they want to run away from it. This is one verse. Another verse or verses in the Holy Quran, and I'll conclude, and this is in Surah chapter 57, Al-Hadid, verses 12 and 13. Verses 12 and 13. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يوم ترى المؤمنين والمؤمنات يسعى نورهم بين أيديهم وبأيمانهم بشراكم اليوم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ذلك هو الفوز العظيم. On that day you will see believing men and women with their light shining ahead of them, and on their right they will be told, today you have good news of gardens under which rivers flow for you to stay in forever. This is truly the ultimate victory. Now let's continue with the following verse. يوم يقول المنافقون والمنافقات للذين آمنوا. On that day, the hypocrite men and women will say to الذين آمنوا, to those who, they will have a request, they'll have an ask. What will they ask? They will say to them, انظرونا نقتبس من نوركم. They will say to them, wait for us so that we may have some of your light. So that light is not symbolic or metaphoric, because it's witnessed by the munafiqeen. They're seeing there's that special light, and the reason why they're asking, they're seeing how soothing that light is and comforting it is for these mu'mineen. They're saying, please, if just don't rush, wait a little bit, let us take a little bit from it. Maybe it will help us. What will they be responded to? The mu'mineen will tell them, or the malaika, قِيلَ ارْجِعُوا وَرَاءَكُمْ فَالْتَمِسُوا نُورًا. They go back. Some of us say, they say to them, go back to dunya, and mockery, like it's too late. Go back to dunya and find the nur. We prepared it, we brought it with us from dunya. These are our actions. If you want it, go back and get it, in mockery. Because these, of course, munafiqeen and munafiqat, are deserving of mockery on the day of judgment. They used to mock the mu'mineen and mu'minat. They used to mock Rasulullah. They used to mock the righteous servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us tawfiq to bring these words into action, insha'Allah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us safeguarded on the day of Al-Faza'ul Akbar, يوم لا ينفع مال ولا بنون إلا من أتى الله بقلب سليم. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه أجمعين محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين.